Welcome back, Legion. The making of a championship. We often see, obviously, a lot of success within the sporting arena, and it's great. That's a lot of the time. That's why we play sport, is to win the ultimate in our respective sports, whether it's a Premiership Cup, a gold medal, a trophy, UEFA Championship, whatever it is. It's that ultimate success. That's why we're playing sport. Obviously, there's other elements like fun, enjoyment, mateship, friendship, etc. But a lot of what brings teams together is that that ability to win. Often, though, we don't really get to see what happens behind closed doors. All the hard work and sacrifice, setbacks, self-doubt, external pressures that goes into being successful. And I'm not necessarily just talking about the elite level, I'm also talking about the semi-professional and amateur levels as well. All levels will have an element of this going on. Obviously, the high ego, probably the heavier weighted the response is, but whatever it means to you is individual. Doesn't really matter of level. If it means a lot to you and the individual and the team, then it's just as sweet, whether you're getting paid millions of dollars for it or not. So I think one thing to consider that's important, especially as spectators watching sporting teams go at it, is that it's not an overnight job. You know, this stuff is years in the making. You can't really define it too much. I'd love to see some analytics on it, some statistical numbers on, you know, how long does it take to create a winning team. But rarely have you seen a team go from absolute cellar-dwellers to bang on top and winning a championship. And even then, I would argue, I'd be curious to see what happened the previous years, and maybe the years where they were not so good. There was just a few things that didn't quite go their way. But there's a lot of things that go into the success of a team, and it's rarely just off that 1 year. It's usually at least 5 years prior to that. And we're talking about meticulous planning and strategy on and off the field, you know, relationship building, and just old-fashioned hard work. These are the things that we don't see. We just see the outcome to all this stuff. We don't really see the day-to-day potential monotonous nature that especially elite sport can be. We only really see the celebrations at the end. And I think that's why you have a lot of raw emotion in those moments, because of all of it just gets expressed in one grand feeling, and it becomes very addictive, that's for sure. When we look at successful teams, they tend to leave clues. Greatness leaves clues. So there are many things that need to happen to create a specific culture of winning and success. And it's often not as easy and apparent as you might think. For sure, talent, you need talented sports people, 100%. But what happens when, you know, you've got a league or a set of teams that all have relatively good talent? There's no necessary team that out-talents the other team. A great line that I share with a lot of my athletes is, you know, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't want to work hard. And this can be true. You can have very talented athletes, but if they're not willing to put the work in, success doesn't always ensue. I think it's really good to look a little bit deeper into some of the more successful teams of the past decades. You know, we're talking about the 95, 96, even 97 Chicago Bulls, and what they were able to do. And then later on, you know, the Lakers in the early noughties, Manchester United in the early noughties, the Hawthorn Football Club of 2013 to 2015, the Hockey Roos, the Olyroos, the All Blacks. There's some really good teams in there, and they do have similar traits. So they might have different environments and different whys, but when you look a little bit deeper, there are some common themes, some broad themes that actually come out. And these are the ingredients that you need to even just start with. Then there's the extra magic on top. But the key ingredients is where we can start to think about creating that successful environment. So the first kind of key ingredient that I believe is important is buy-in. Now we talk about buying, the buy-in to the process. Buy-in can't just be from coaches and players. It has to be from everyone in that organisation or anyone that affects that team, from front office to administration to support staff. Everyone must buy into the process because it only takes one kink in the chain to break the chain. So it's really important that everyone kind of buys into it. This kind of brings me to my second thing, because buy-in is a lot easier said than done. I think everyone knows buy-in is important, but how to execute buy-in is another step. And this is where we come to a concept, we, not me. And this is where what we're trying to do is create belief. Like, a big part of buy-in is belief. Understanding a process is one thing, but believing in it is completely different. Hence why we have religions. It's easy enough to understand religious beliefs, but it's another to truly believe and be passionate about it. And that's how you can have massive congregations following the same, leadership. Teams are just a microcosm of this. Sporting teams are just a small example of this. But we, not me, is kind of a representation of, it's not just the X's and O's. Strategy is important, obviously, but it only gets you so far if people aren't believing, like truly believing in the process. And I have to emphasize the word believe, because, just knowing and being out there, it's not enough. Like, you have to, everyone has to be on board with, this is what we're going to do. Then all of a sudden, you start to get some different forms of sacrifices. When your better players start to sacrifice their own individual performance for the benefit of the team, that's when we know we've got true belief. And I think the really good sporting teams do this and demonstrate it. And the sacrifice can come in many different ways. It doesn't always have to be on the field. It can be off field as well. That's where the sacrifices can be expressed. Once we've kind of got that, then we know we can build upon, how do we get that is another way. So really, buy-in and belief is created through good communication and building relationships. It can't just be sat down and here's the tactics and this is what we believe in. It has to be a development process, and it can take time, hence, the years in the making to build those relationships. And those relationships often need to go a little bit deeper than just being a teammate or a coach or a player under a coach. They have to go a little bit deeper. We need to get to know each other a little bit stronger. The deeper that connection, the better the belief, the better the execution in the long run. I think the third piece to this as well is embracing the monotony. Now, successful teams do great things really well, and rarely are they done in a once-off fashion. Great teams repeat the process. They refine it. They nail it, because it's never going to be perfect. Because remember, you have an opposition that is literally trying to stop you from doing what you want to do. They've put all the work and effort into stopping you playing the way you want to, whether you're a team sport or you're an individual athlete. And you would do the same for your opponent as well. So getting really good at your craft by practicing hours on end, the same things, to refine it to the point that it becomes automatic. That's the key. The really good teams execute in the highest pressure situations, and they execute because their default is what they have practiced. That's why training and practice is super important, because it allows you to execute what you need to do. And look, if you're great at executing on the best day, well, then awesome. But the reality is, sport reflects life, and life is generally perfect. It's probably less perfect more often than not. So it's how you adapt and react in those situations, and that's what great sporting teams do. But they default to what they have practiced. Bruce Lee has an excellent quote for this. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And I think that really embraces this idea of monotony. Sometimes it's going to be boring, but if you can fight through that boringness, and to be able to execute when it counts, it's all worth it. I think there's one more thing about a championship run, and it's a bit of luck. And this goes both ways, by the way. I'm not necessarily just talking about good luck. I'm also referring to bad luck. You can have a team that is in such a good position, and it just takes like a key injury to an important player, or an off-field act, or the weather sometimes. It's usually something out of the team's control or the individual's control. And it can just happen, and it can just derail everything. So many things can be set up, and it just bang, a little bit of bad luck can happen. Really great teams and individuals obviously fight through this, and they find a way still to win, and that's obviously incredibly impressive to see someone do that. And I think by doing that, they end up creating their own good luck, and they find another way to, I guess, get themselves in a position to be successful. And look, if you don't believe in luck, that's fair enough, and you tend to create your own luck. I definitely believe that. But sometimes it just happens. Like if we think about, that bounce of the ball, or that gust of wind, or the clutch play that just happens, and it just comes out of nowhere, that fluke shot. Like, that's like, some of that has to be luck. And yeah, and if it's going your way on one day, then it goes your way, and that's where that success can be had. But I don't think you can necessarily just create a championship winning team or individual without a bit of luck going your way. So there's obviously a lot more that can be covered within this. I just wanted to kind of brief overview, because there's a lot of finals being played now and a lot of conclusions to seasons, and I find that part really interesting, going a little bit deeper into just winning, just accepting a team being good for the sake of being good. It's what goes into it, how much work and effort actually goes into that moment, that piece of success. Thanks for listening. Let's hope it turned off. It did not turn off.